G'day, I'm Andra Keay. I'm Managing Director of Silicon Valley Robotics and visiting scholar at Citrus People and Robots Lab at the Universities of California. Now, it's time to rethink everything you think you know about what's happening in robotics, drones, and self-driving vehicles, because robotics is like this iceberg. Even the world's best experts usually only see the top 10% of the picture. And that means you aren't getting the full picture of recent changes in the robotics industry that are so significant I've started calling it Robotics 2.0, because Robotics 1.0 is just the tip of this iceberg. And to navigate the robotics iceberg, you need to really understand what's happening, what's changed, and what the new problems in robotics are going to look like. So at the top of the iceberg, we have Robotics 1.0, which is usually misleadingly called the robotics industry or industrial robotics, that consists mainly of expensive robot arms shut away in factories, with one primary market, the automotive industry. Since the 1970s, more than half of all these highly specialized and somewhat stupid industrial robots have worked shut away in cages in the automotive industry. Another quarter of the pie worked in industrial manufacturing, doing metalwork, spray painting, or welding, and the remainder worked in consumer electronic assembly and semiconductor manufacturing. The final tiny slice of the pie was called other, meaning unknown, or service robots, which is just a catch-all for the wide range of robots that are doing things from robot vacuum cleaners in the home to surgical robots, telepresence robots, mining machines, or Defense Force drones. So there's nothing wrong with the Robotics 1.0 industry. It is growing significantly. It's exceeding predictions, and it's been growing about 12 to 15% every year for the last 10 years, in spite of global economic downturns and the recent US-China trade war, which has had an impact. But in 2019, the Robotics 1.0 industry was valued at 48 billion US dollars, which is including the software and peripherals. That's pretty impressive growth, but I think what gives you a real sense of this is the installation number. We've gone from 100,000 installations of robots per year in 2010 to over 400,000 per year in 2018. And alongside this growth, the global statistics organizations, who have usually relied on sales figures, are having to grapple with the rapid growth of the unknown other segment, which is now up to a rather impressive 20%. I think it's actually larger than that. That means that global statistics bodies don't actually know what's happening in at least a quarter of the industry. But major banks are using investment as an indicator of the leading edge of changes in robotics. And that's the sort of information that I track at Silicon Valley Robotics, where we're at the center of the enormous growth of innovation of other sorts of robots in all of these industry areas. In fact, the director of the DARPA Robotics Challenge, Dr. Gil Pratt, said that robotics is having a Cambrian explosion of growth. And this refers not just to the incremental increases in industrial robots, Robotics 1.0, but to the qualitative change of the nature of what is a robot. We have the power of a Cray 2 supercomputer or Deep Blue in our pockets, literally. And thanks to advances in the smartphone industry and the addition of affordable sensors, robots are finally able to compute real-world navigation in real time. So today's robots are mobile. Or if they're robot arms, they may be collaborative or capable of operation around people. They can navigate in the real-world environment in real time. And that's why we're starting to see robots emerging in every industry. The fourth industrial revolution will see smart robots involved in the production and transportation of everything. And in fact, Dr. Gil Pratt is now running the Toyota Research Institute, which are working on household robots and self-driving vehicles. Now, Silicon Valley is underestimated as the world capital of robotics because of the oversized technology giants that surround us. But when you look at investment figures over the last 10 years, then 25 to 40% of global investment into robotics has happened in Silicon Valley. The next largest regions are Boston and Beijing, which have only 5 to 10% at best of the global totals. And robotics is receiving investment from all around the world. We're seeing the growth of robotics everywhere. In Silicon Valley alone, there are more than 50 robotics research labs and potentially 500 to 600 robotics technology companies. It can be very hard to quantify because most of those companies are less than 5 years old. Many are pre-revenue. Some are even in stealth until they're ready to announce what they're working on. So Silicon Valley is ground zero for seeing the emerging innovative use cases for robotics. What we see first, you will find the rest of the world will soon follow. In the last decade, we've gone as an organization from focusing on helping robotics startups get investment to focusing on helping robotics companies enter new markets and create new categories. And overall, the entire robotics industry, if we include revenue, equity investment, and mergers and acquisitions, then in 2020, the robotics industry is now worth more than 150 billion US dollars. Robotics is booming. Our biggest problem is now people. We have an aging demographic. In fact, all urbanized countries are suffering the same problem. We're living longer and our working population is rapidly reaching retirement. We need to increase global productivity, which has remained largely plateaued since the Second World War. The economist Robert Solow famously remarked that you can see the evidence of the computer age everywhere except in productivity statistics, because we've seen no real significant changes since World War II. However, robotics will take computing into the physical environment and can significantly impact our manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, energy, and infrastructure, providing us with a radically new path for productivity growth in the future. But our biggest problem is still people. It's not about robots taking jobs, quite the opposite. It's about finding enough people to build and deploy the robots that the markets are now demanding. Fortune 500 companies have been acquiring robotics companies and robotics professionals at a simply astonishing pace. Many of them have their own in-house robotics departments, and large tech companies can afford to pay bigger salaries and bonuses than smaller robotics startups, even if those startups are working on world-changing technologies. Also, the majority of the world's businesses, 99.7% of them, employing 82.5% of the world's population, have only 25% of the world's GDP. So the bankroll of the small to medium enterprise is much smaller than that of the Fortune 500s. The biggest problem we're facing in the next 5 to 10 years isn't deploying robots. It's going to be finding robots to deploy in all of the small businesses that are out there, integrating robotics into the small, medium enterprises to keep all of our small businesses afloat and to help them improve their productivity, especially to compete with the global Fortune 500. For the majority of small companies, robotics is just too hard, too complex, and too expensive. And we're going to need more than 1 million robotics professionals in the next year or so. So I hope I've alarmed you. And I hope you're going to join us as we seek answers to these global challenges in robotics. Thank you.